Well, 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 what have we here? It is Saturday, September. Wait a minute, it's September 2nd. It's noon Eastern time. I am Bob Harris. This is the Football Diehards YouTube channel, and it's time for our weekly Ask Me Anything live stream. This week it's another old school solo edition, so I can get a lot of questions, and I also want to touch on some draft day strategies. I know some of you are still drafting. Many of you have been all along, but for the people who are really dialed in and focused on that last final all important draft, we'll focus on some big picture strategies, at least in the opening of the show before I get to your questions. But before I get to all that, FootballDiehards.com is the website. We appreciate you joining us here on the YouTube channel every Saturday at this time, also on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. for our On the Hot Seat. These will continue on into the season, so steel yourself. I'm not going anywhere. Hope that works for all of you. Works for me. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell and the like button. You don't have to like me, but appreciate it if you'd like the channel. Subscribe to the channel and visit the channel often. Appreciate everyone who comes. You all know that. So hope everyone's having a great day. Brian, Robert, Dame, Wendy, thanks for coming in, everybody. Wendy, I can't believe you did not. Look, I'm happy with Mixim. My pros with Joe's I'm talking about. Great fantasy nav. Our buddy Eric Romoff puts together the pros with Joe's event every year, and it's a ton of fun. We did our draft yesterday. It's kind of an unusual draft. One quarterback, 8 flexes. So a wide range of strategies available to everyone. And it's interesting to see how everyone chooses to take your approach. You're working with your Joe, as I'm the pro. In my case, whether it had been Wendy or it's Mitch Zimmer, who I currently have, they're every bit as pro as I am. So there we go. Mr. Scampers, like, subscribe, and notified. Appreciate you. Appreciate everyone coming. It's been a great off season and ready to jump into the regular season. There's not a ton of newsy stuff. We'll get to some of that. Hello, Peter. After I kind of run through, I just want to give you some. I don't even want to call them pro tips. Probably just common sense, right? Things to watch for in your draft, right? Or to think about as you head into your draft. Number one, prepare. I mean, this seems obvious. You're here. You've been preparing. If you haven't been steeped in draft, whether it's, mostly best ball is how I like to do it. But do some quick mocks. If you're just heading into your final home league and you haven't done a lot of drafting, do a couple quick mocks just to get a feel for the possibilities and the range of outcomes at the position you're drafting from, right? I mean, be ready, because here's the thing. Rule number 2 for me is divorce emotion from the process to the degree possible, right? Emotion is the wellspring of mistakes, right? It's where mistakes come from. So to the degree you can divorce emotion from that process, most of your draft errors come from emotion and a lack of preparation, right? You're sitting there, the player you've been targeting all along goes a pick before you, or the pick two before you, and you're at a loss. You don't have a fallback plan. Why? Because you're angry, you're upset, you're mad that your player's lost, and then you get scared that you're not ready. A little preparation goes a long way, and also a little calm, a little cool. I know that should go without saying, but it does not. We're all kind of creatures of habit. So keep that in mind. It's a really important part of this. The preparation in particular can help your emotions from getting away from you, knowing what your next move is. And like when I'm sitting there in a draft and my pick is coming, when I'm 4 players away, I have 4 players I'll be perfectly happy with, right? And maybe I want one of them. And hello, Golf Boy. Hello, Wintermute. Hi, Brian. Appreciate y'all coming. Hey, Jim Furry. Appreciate the having a list in your mind, a mental checklist, so that when you're moving down, look, maybe everyone goes and you put those players in your queue, and that's helpful for me as well. So the top 2, preparation and trying to get the emotions out of your system before you draft. Hello, Andrea. Thanks for coming. Those 2 things alone, right? Just having a feel for what's going to happen in drafts will help you keep the emotions calm when things aren't going your way. Have a plan, put some players in your queue. I do it like each round. As I'm heading towards my pick, I'll put a handful of things in there. Question from Robert: what do you bring to your draft cheat sheet? Something to keep track of others. I think most of us are drafting on platforms. If you're in a home league, though, it doesn't hurt to have some draft software with you. that helps you track the entire draft. One thing, you can do is have the checkoff list, even if it's printed out. That's a good thing. A lot of people will create a spreadsheet in Excel or Google Sheets, whatever, and kind of knock players off. If you have a big draft board, that's an easy way to do it. Online is the easiest way for me. That's most of my drafts. I'm not in a in-person home league. I did do my Scott Fishbowl, though, live, and I think, I was tracking it more closely online. I think even the home leagues, a lot of them use that. But if I'm going to a single draft, I have my laptop. I have my rankings available to me on my laptop. You can go to FootballDiehards.com, create a customizable cheat sheet based on our rankings and your scoring system and lineup configuration. So all those things are things I would consider taking. I would take no adult beverages, but that's just me because I don't do adult beverages. You wouldn't like me when I drink. I'm going to have to put you in an 18 Guillotine hat on later. I have done a 18-team Guillotine draft, so the hat is standing by. So preparation helps you keep the emotions calm, people. The better prepared you are, the better off you're going to be. All right, here's my thing. I know Marcus Grant loves this one. It's my old man idiom of the day here. Don't draft last year's best team, right? That doesn't mean last year's best players aren't going to be good. They are, right? It's true. But so I think this is a rule you have to remember as well. And I think JJ Zachariason puts it best, my buddy over at Late Round Football. Regression is a thing, right? Or as JJ puts it, regression is everything. And it's something you need to be mindful of. Michael Fabiano, my colleague at SI, at SiriusXM, who works at SI now, says don't draft magical seasons. But, but that works two ways. Be mindful of that as well, right? So don't draft the magical season, and maybe to be ready to, cash in on the values created by unmagical seasons. As for the regression, I think, you look at consistency, and my friend Bob Lung talks about this a lot, but let's take, for example, Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry, who are going in the same range. I'm not against drafting Josh Jacobs, right? I think he's going to be great. Last year, he had 340 carries. Prior to that, he had 217, 273, and 242. Some regression to the mean is coming for him. Like maybe it's only 300. Like maybe he gets 300 carries. That's still a ton of carries. But expecting that 340, that has not been the norm for him. Let's look on the other hand at Derrick Henry. We can go back to 2019, 303, 378. He had 219 in 2021, which was due to injury primarily. He only played 8 games. And he was on pace for what? A record number of carries, by the way. He had 349 last year. Regression is not going to be as big a thing for him in terms of carries, assuming he remains healthy and all things remain equal. So just be mindful of that and be mindful of magical seasons. They can be dangerous, right? We all want them. Look, I'm not talking about Justin Fields in particular, but Justin Fields' season last year was pretty magical, right? We can go back to Michael Thomas's 2019. He's never been able to duplicate. We can go back to Lamar Jackson's 2019. He hasn't been able to duplicate that either, right? So there are things to be mindful of. It doesn't mean these players don't have a range of possible outcomes, and the high end of the range is well worth the price you're paying. But just keep that in mind when you're looking at players. And, and I know it sounds corny because it is. Don't draft last year's best team is a real thing. But don't be afraid to draft some of last year's best players because they're still going to be good. Just don't have the same expectations. A couple other things. Have a plan. I know I see some questions about this. And so have a plan to be ready to deviate from the plan. That's probably, rule number one. I'm going to go in. I'm going zero RB. I'm going hero RB. I'm going to go hyper fragile RB. I'm going to go super hyper fragile, casualistic SB Aladocious, whatever. Wide receiver heavy, bully tight end. All these things, they're all viable strategies, right? Be ready to deviate from the plan. Let the draft dictate the plan. Have an overarching strategy and theory. I see you, Charles, asking that question. Do you have a strategy for drafting for value versus positional needs? I do. I'll talk about that a little bit. But have a plan in place. Y'all know what you want to accomplish. You know your objectives going into a draft. I want this kind of roster. Well, how you construct it, you can build it many different ways. And maybe the way you anticipated going in isn't the way you end up building it, but you still end up building it, right? So I'm fine with that. First round, you're drafting everybody at their ceiling. Might pay to be safe if that's what you're looking for, right? Yes, I'm going Mary Poppins, Wendy. What about it? First round, everybody drafting at their ceiling. And I talk about this in terms of Bijan Robinson. I'm not against drafting Bijan Robinson in the first round. I just haven't seen his ceiling yet. I'm taking a leap of faith with him. Taking a leap of faith is fine, but there are other players that are maybe more proven. And that brings up like Cooper Kupp right now, who was my wide receiver 1. Dame, cover your ears. I've moved him down noticeably. I just feel like I was drafting him to be an every week play at his. I'm ranking him as an every week play at that super high weekly average that he's posted over the last 2 years in points per game. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing. It would be perfectly reasonable, that is, were he healthy. I don't know. I don't want to overstate the case. And I haven't moved him down. He's still a wide receiver 1 for me, but he's at the tail end. Dwayne McFarland put out a tweet this week. He knocked off 2 games and took his target share down 1%, and he fell to wide receiver 12. Still going to be a great receiver, still going to be a wide receiver 1, but do I want to invest that first round capital in him as eagerly as I did before, or even an early first round draft capital? I'm probably not doing that. Now, second round, if people get scared, and that's something I'm going to talk about in a moment here as well. If people get fearful and he falls into the second round, I'll be all over that. But I'm going to be a little more cautious, and I don't want to overreact, right? But I want to react. And that's another key about, preparation, making sure you have all the information you need, and being ready to go. So first round, everybody is drafting everybody their ceiling, so play it safer if that's what you're doing. If you're taking risks, this. You can have risk on your roster without having a risky roster. I know people who have been here have heard me say this, but it's totally true. You should go into a draft if you're taking a chance. If you take a Cooper Kupp, you might have to invest more heavily at wide receiver earlier in the draft than you previously planned, or it might have been ideal, or certainly than you would have had if you were going in without any concerns about Cooper Kupp's health, right? And I don't think we're overplaying Cooper Kupp's health, right? He injured his hamstring. If you're just dialing up here and going, what the hell? Why is everyone scared of Cooper Kupp? I'll tell you why. I haven't been, right? I've been all in. I like the idea of them. He was hurt on July 27th. They sat him out until last week. Seemed to be coming along fine. He said he would be fine. He suffered a setback, right? I know you're all saying, Bob, you're injury agnostic. I am. I'm also not, stupid, not to my detriment. I'm not going to be injury agnostic to my detriment. I'm injury agnostic as to players who are not yet hurt, who have been hurt in the past, but who are currently hurt, right? So, if a player is currently hurt, it makes a different decision. I'm not injury agnostic when somebody is currently hurt. So that's kind of the approach there, right? Here's a big one here. I'm big on this. Everyone who's been in this chat a lot knows and comes to these regularly. Don't be a prisoner of ADP, right? I mean, in the industry, it's a big deal, right? You don't want to reach, and I've talked about it before. Jeff Ratcliffe thinks reach is the dirtiest word. And his analogy is you don't walk into Starbucks and order a coffee, and when they say $6 for your cup of coffee, you say, I'd like to pay you $7, right? That's fair. I get that. But also, I'm playing fantasy football. I want players I want, right? So ADP is when. Average draft position is when players are being drafted on the aggregate, right? It's not when you have to draft them. There's not a rule that says you have to follow ADP. There's not a rule that says people who are laughing at you should feel bad, right? I mean, who cares? You want the players you want, right? So we have a tool at FootballDiehards.com. By the way, did I mention that's a website? You should go there. Promo code Diehards gets you 15% off. We're finishing up our August update in preseason draft guide. That'll morph into the flash update regular season service. So you don't want to miss out on that. Tons of weekly content there. Great articles, rankings, weekly rankings adjusted on the fly up to the minute. So tons of information available there. But that's the thing about ADP, right? ADP is not when you have to draft players. It's when they're being drafted. It's telling you when you have to draft players you want. So one of the tools on the website is the Stomp tool that helps you. You can import your rankings, and it'll spit out times when you maybe want to take a push on a player that you have heavy feelings for or a strong desire to land. So there you have it. It should go without saying, yet here I am telling you this anyway. Make sure you have a full understanding of your league scoring system and roster requirements. You'd be surprised at how many people don't. Also know the waiver processes and the timing of all that. It'll help you out. I will remind you, the trend is your friend, right? Risers and fallers. Take advantage of the trends, the emotions, and fears of others while you're being fearful, while they're being fearful, you're being emotionless, right? And you're going to take advantage of them because you're being emotionless. You are a killer. Oh, I just went Jonathan Gannon in there. How about that video? Did you guys see that video yesterday? Throw that in the chat if you saw the Jonathan Gannon super well received motivational speech. I feel like I'm giving that to you, but you're taking it much better than the Arizona Cardinals did. Be informed. Stay informed. You're here. You know what's going on, but go to FootballDiehards.com. Listen to the Football Diehards on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. I'll be on tonight from 5 to 7, taking a ton of calls with Mike Dempsey. We did a special last night, a 3-hour NFL radio program, which is replaying on NFL radio over the course of the weekend. They also replayed it on the Fantasy channel. It may replay again. Kind of went in depth, had some really good guests, Joe Pisapia, Tara Roberts, Casey Joyner, the football scientist, two of whom you can find at FootballDiehards.com, by the way. Joe Pisapia, you will find out there in many, many places as well. So look for him. But good information. We dug into my rankings a fair amount and discussed those. So Jim Furry mentions the bandwagon effect. See players moving up now have been discussed a lot in the media. Do you pass or reach if you think they will produce? I think that's part of knowing the trend is your friend, knowing the risers and fallers at any current point in time to take advantage of the trends and the emotions and fears of others. So yes, notice who's being talked about in the media negatively in particular. I think is very helpful. So I'll get to your questions here. I see them coming in. If I miss saying hello to anyone, I'm sorry. Dave Listman, hi there. Let's see. What is the Golf Boy wants to know, what is the right round for Mostert now? Probably higher, right, than it has been. His ADP has been super low, I want to say. Let me just grab his current ADP in high stakes even. Mostert, let's see. PPR 12 running backs. I'm going to go high stakes because I like to see what the big money players are saying here. They're usually a little ahead of the curve. Mostert is going right now as running back 36, about round 9. I think if you wanted to jump up around, the players going slightly ahead of him, Samaje Perine, who I did have some interesting conversations on the. I'll share that with you in a minute. But Mostert is going at 36. I think that's pretty fair value. With Devin Achane, of course, is a little beat up right now. Not sure he'll be available week 1. If you did not hear, Jeff Wilson Jr. is on IR, so he will miss the first 4 games. I know you're all out there saying, you were drafting him like crazy, Bob. I was. I'm hoping he comes back strong after week 5. His agent says that's going to be the case. I'm hoping it will. We don't have a lot of information on Jeff Wilson's injuries. It sounds like a rib and a pinky finger injury. Hoping that's not the case. Getting back to Perine, the Javonte Williams and Perine situation while I'm there, kind of similar, and we'll talk about all those running backs that are dealing with situations. Talked to Parker Gabriel at the Denver Post late this week about Samaje Perine. So it's been really positive reporting on Javonte Williams, right? And I think the assumption is he's going to be ready to go week 1, and I think he is. Parker Gabriel suggested we dial back on that a little bit, and he thinks they're going to be really cautious with Javonte Williams. We'll see. So that should mean still a pretty good dose of Samaje Perine early on. So be ready for that. Be ready for a heavy dose of Mostert. So I think, running back 3 is right around where I take him, the tail end of the running back 3s. I mean, there is going to be a bit of a share there, and at some point Jeff Wilson's going to be back. But Mostert is the lead piece right there. I think Andrea will tell you to the moon with Raheem Mostert. The Dolphins, even though we think of this as a run-heavy offense, I think they ran the ball fewer times than any other team in the league last year. So be mindful of that as well. But the less it's split up, the better off he is. And Mostert is ideally suited to this scheme. We've seen it dating back to his time in San Francisco. So definitely not, taking him and moving a little bit ahead of people to do so. Brian Larkin brings his Die Hard magazine. I hope you bring updated printouts from the website. A lot of updates. How do I feel about DJ Moore and Amari Cooper this year? I've been pretty high on Amari Cooper. I think I've dialed him back. He's fallen a little bit in my rankings, my most recent update, for a couple reasons. Number one, I don't like what I'm hearing about Deshaun Watson's offseason. It just hasn't been great, right? I mean, I'm hoping for the best. He's fallen down my rankings a little bit, but Elijah Moore, more than Amari Cooper falling, Elijah Mitchell's been rising. I mentioned it on this broadcast here recently, but on the radio program, we had Steve King from the Browns Daily Dose talking about Elijah Moore. We asked him what 3 players this offense is going to run through. And he said Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb, and not Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore. Right, so, but he mentioned Amari Cooper is still going to be the wide receiver one, still going to have good numbers. I think maybe expecting him to hit last year's total might be asking a little much. I think he was inside the top 10 or right at the top 10 last year. I still have him right there at the tail end of the wide receiver ones, but I've moved some players up a little bit and some players down, said Cooper Kupp, to be fair. But I mean, Calvin Ridley has moved up ahead of him for me, and I'm probably a little stronger on Chris Olave now. So he's right there at 13. So, ostensibly the tail end of the wide receiver ones, right in that group there. And DJ Moore, I think you're getting a great value on him. Look at his current ADP in the high stakes leagues. Look, I've been encouraged by what I've seen from him. He's up to wide receiver 18 going in the third round, late tail end of the third round. I see him go a little later in the drafts I've been in. I think that's a fair price. Andrea, I have AR-15. Who should I pick up? Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Jared Goff for a backup. I think all those bye weeks work out, Andrea. I'm probably going in the order you list them. Cousins, Daniel Jones, and Goff. I think Goff, we kind of know what the issue is there a little bit with him. It's the up and uneven play. He's really good at home and was not as good otherwise, but maybe he evens it out a little bit. I think Kirk Cousins is a super safe, not just super safe, but likely a high-end play, right? The finishes have been great. What did he finish last year? I want to say he finished like something insane. Something like, yeah, he was quarterback 7 last year. That's pretty good. Daniel Jones, by the way, was quarterback 9. Jared Goff, quarterback 10 last year. So I think that's the order I like him. And I feel I feel pretty comfortable with it. If I ended up with any of them, I feel pretty comfortable. So the question Charles Davis asked earlier, and I'm catching up on the questions. I appreciate y'all asking and being patient. And if you're just coming in, I'm Bob Harris. Hi, it's draft time. Hope you're ready. If not, let's get there. Jim. Look at man, you guys got me on the Mary Poppins here. Do I have a strategy for drafting value versus positional needs? I'm a little obsessive compulsive. I like to fill things in an orderly way. That said, value matters to me, right? If I'm sitting there and I feel like I'm following the process, and I do tend to plug in and get my starters laid in, and then start working my way through, kind of almost checklist style. I'm going to go value ahead of positional needs in the moment, right? As you get later in drafts, and sometimes because of that, I find myself thinking, man, there's some players I really love later that I can get a lot cheaper that I'm going to miss out on because this player here is at a great price at a position I was hoping to invest in later. I'll do that, right? So I'm always about the value. If there's a player who's like just standing out and I feel like I've already got that position covered, I'm not afraid to go in and add a little bit to that position. Davante Adams, okay for a second-round pick. 100% okay for a second-round pick. I will share this with you. Davante Adams is currently my wide receiver 7 in my rankings. I was talking about this on the radio program last night. If you're familiar with my friend Matt Harmon, the reception perception guy. He charts the kind of routes players run and where they have success, what routes they have success on, what kind of coverages they have success on. Davante Adams has success against every kind of coverage, press, man, zone. He has success against it on every route. I'm just not going to let my fear or my concern or the public at large concern. I probably don't share in them as much as others about Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he'll be fine. I'm not expecting he doesn't have to throw all the deep balls, right? It's not Davante Adams can win all the routes. So I'm fine taking him in a second-round pick. I think it's going to end up being strong value. Someone says SD Malaguti. Said the name butcher. Someone already offered me Tyrek Hill for CeeDee Lamb. Any reason not to take that? None that I know of. It seems like you're rearranging the furniture a little bit, right? I mean, you have 2 top 10 wide receivers. If you don't have a preference, I mean, I have Hill ahead of Lamb, so yeah, I'm good with that. Mr. Scamper says unique lineups available for Kupp with him now falling into the second round in best balls. That is 100% true, right? That's something I've mentioned. We want to take advantage of these circumstances, right? Even if they're not positive circumstances in the moment, doesn't mean you can't have a positive outcome at the end of the year. If at the end of the year, Cooper Kupp has played 15 games and he leads the entire NFL wide receiving contingent in fantasy points per game, as he has when healthy the last 2 years, you're going to be glad you had him, and you'll be glad you had him for a second round price is in addition. So, right, this is the thing. And some of this is personal risk tolerance. And I'm maybe a little more tolerant than other people when it comes to risk. Y'all know why. I don't care if I don't care. Once I'm not in first place, I don't care what place I'm in, right? So if I'm taking chances that I feel like will get me to first place, great. And sometimes that means I fail. Damn it. Sometimes I do. Wait a minute. Oftentimes I do, right? I'm not like winning. I just counted last night. I'm in 34 leagues I have to manage this year. I'm not going to win all those leagues. I'm not. I hope to win a handful of them. I hope to make the playoffs in all of them. But I mean, taking it all the way to the championship requires, both skill, some degree of luck, and some degree of drafting good, and some degree of roster management. Something I'm not as good at when I'm managing 34 teams. Although I will say, go to the website, FootballDiehards.com, use the My Fantasy GM feature in there, get into the Draft Hero portion of the site, and you'll find all kinds of helpful ways to help you manage your teams across a wide range of platforms. And so you'll find that very helpful. I do. The bandwagon effect, see players moving up now have been discussed a lot. Yes, I kind of touched on this, but you'll see a lot of that. And, just to touch on some of the risers and fallers right now that, we're looking at. Josh Jacobs is going up, right? Raheem Mostert, who we mentioned, is going up. Tank Bigsby is another one who I see rising, and conversely, Travis Etienne's falling. I don't think Tank Bigsby has risen to the point where I'm not still happy and feeling like I'm getting a value on him. The Indianapolis situation is leaving some openings there. It sounds like Deon Jackson. I know Aaron Wilson, a longtime NFL beat writer now in Houston, is reporting that Deon Jackson will be the week 1 starter. Zach Moss won't be ready until week 2 or so. And Evan Hull is in the mix there as well, so draft him late. Let's see, who else? Van Jefferson obviously rises up. Will be the de facto wide receiver 1. Tyler Higbee in the mix there. I know people are probably excited about Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua in Los Angeles. I am less so. I think Cooper Kupp will be back. Who else is rising? But use those kind of trends. And conversely, as people rise, people are falling. Jonathan Taylor. Look, if he falls down outside the top 2, outside the top 24, right, which he is, he's going to go in the 30s, I think is what you're going to see. I'm not afraid to take him there if I have 2 solid running backs ahead of him. And you're rolling the dice, right? The odds are that he's going to end up playing at some point. And also the odds are he's pretty good when he plays. We've seen that in the past. I'm willing to take a chance on that at some point under the right set of circumstances. So as he falls, I'm watching how far he falls and see if I can leverage that, take advantage of it. The trend is your friend. I mentioned this. Even the negative trends for Jonathan Taylor. Other guys are falling as well. I think Jeff Wilson, obviously, for the obvious reasons. Kupp for the obvious reasons. A lot of injury-related ones. So, watch out for those. And like Breece Hall falling. Dalvin Cook rising, but not rising to the point where doesn't still feel like a really good value to me. I'm going to have way more Dalvin Cook in the last month than I do Breece Hall. And I think Breece Hall is falling to a manageable spot, but like even the latest reporting, from the people who cover this team on a daily basis, and Dan Graziano from ESPN expects a heavy dose of Dalvin Cook early in the season. I do too. My co-host on the radio program, Mike Dempsey, makes a really strong point that the Jets paid Dalvin Cook to be a running back 1, right? Well, whatever you think of Dalvin Cook, it was a down year. Well, okay, look at the last 3 years of production for Dalvin Cook. And you'll see maybe why. Maybe last year was not really a down year. It was just like a normal year for most backs. It was maybe a slightly down year for him. So he comes in there and they pay him almost $8 million, $7 million, base. And that's running back 1 money. That's high-end money in this market right now. So don't overlook that when you're drafting. Andrea does not go by ADP when she drafts, and she is a sharp drafter. Robert Farron also does not look at ADP. Something you have to do, though, is go into your draft platform's draft room and watch how the players are presented to you. Often they are presented in the form of ADP on that site. Every site's ADP might be different. It depends on who's been drafting there, right? So watch that. I like to go in before draft and scroll all the way through and set some players aside that I have really strong feelings about in my queue And it doesn't mean I'm going to prioritize drafting them. I'm going to wait till the appropriate time, but I want them to be on my radar so I know they're floating around out there, because sometimes they're guys that are just totally off the ADP on the site you're looking at, right? And you know, people out of sight, out of mind for the people who are just coming into the room and haven't been drafting all off season long and don't know what's going on and don't have a plan and let their emotions get in the way of their drafting and all those things. Crush those people. Crush them. Okay. Don't crush them, but punish them for their lack of preparation and not following my rules. The players had no idea what he was talking about. The Gannon, it was crazy. You go out on your platform formerly known as Twitter and check that out. It's fantastic. Jonathan Gannon somehow made his pew, pew, pew shots explosive. Speech looked eloquent and motivational with that latest clip. It was not pretty. The players did not seem to be buying in. Which Colts running backs to pick up? Deon Jackson, Zach Moss, Cole. I kind of ran through that a little bit. I think the one you can get, right, the early starter is going to be Jackson, but I don't know how much faith I have in him holding on to that. I think it's going to be the dreaded murky three-man committee once it's all up and running with Jackson, Moss, and Hull all playing a role. So pick your poison. Maybe the cheap one is I wouldn't mind having a piece of it. I just don't think we'll get clarity week to week on who it's going to be unless Deon Jackson comes out of the chute super fast. You're not going to know that when you're drafting. What round for Deon Jackson? Let's see where he's going just in general in the latest trends. He's going to be going higher than he has been. We'll start with that. He's currently going round 15 in high stakes drafts. They're pretty much ahead of the curve. I'll tell you the range of players he's going around. Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, Ty Chandler, Deuce Vaughn, who has risen up the ranks a little bit. Kendre Miller currently hurt. Some of the players going after him now are Kareem Hunt, Jeffrey Wilson, Kyron Williams, Zamir White, Zach Moss going a little cheaper piece there, but you'll miss some time with him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So he's risen up notably. So you'll probably have to, if you want to land him, you may want to consider round 14 or even 13 if you want to ensure having him. That'll be a bit of a, it's a reasonable price, right? And that's the key for me. He's not going to be the all season long starter, I don't think. But again, they could change. They could trade Jonathan Taylor. So having a piece of that seems viable. So both Jackson and Moss going around the same range. I think Hull probably going a little cheaper than them. Yeah, he's going around 16. So currently Moss 15, Jackson 15, early 15, Moss late 15, Hull currently 16. So make the adjustment. Again, don't be the prisoner of ADP. ADP is when they're going. If you want them, jump a little ahead. The Superflex drafting 6, most likely grabbing Herbert as QB. That would most likely be a great plan, and probably you'll get him in a Superflex. I think that's, my experiences in Superflex is every damn one is different. And how big a race to quarterback is the question you'll find out. If you're drafting 1, 2, or 3, I think that doesn't leave you a lot of wiggle room in not drafting a quarterback because you might get shut out. You don't know how the room's going to play out. At 6, you'll have a pretty good idea, right? Maybe some other skill players will have gone off and maybe a higher end quarterback, or maybe you think Herbert is that guy that should be right at 4 or something, but maybe only 3 quarterbacks have gone off when it gets to 6. So you may have some choices, but I think Herbert is a good starting point. What round should he go? His next QB. Well, this is where you can take advantage of the room, right? And you want to pair him with Richardson. I think that's a great play. I love doing Richardson as my second quarterback or even my first quarterback in a super flex, and getting a couple steady guys after him is reasonable. I think if you have Herbert and you add Anthony Richardson, that'd be great. You might have to do it in round 2, but that's the key. You'll have an idea probably by the end of the first round where this is heading in terms of the quarterback race. Is it going to be an all-out barn burner? Everyone's racing to get their quarterback in the first 2 rounds. You'll see that a lot. Sometimes you don't. So pay attention to that and adjust your strategy accordingly. You're in a good position in the middle of the round. I'm assuming it's a 12-teamer to have a good idea of where it's going by as you come around the turn and get to your second pick. Looking for 2 or 3 deep sleepers for Dynasty League, running backs and wide receivers only. These are hard questions because there's so many wide range of players. I mean, if I'm taking shots on wide receivers, the guys I've been taking shots on are Michael Wilson in Arizona. I don't know who the quarterback is. He's probably gonna slip down farther. Don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be there over the long term, but he's kind of the different piece there. Seems like he may even have a role this year. He has to stay healthy. That hasn't been a great thing for him. Tank Dell, I know, is another name that people are big on. He may be going higher. I don't know if he's even a deep sleeper anymore. Xavier Hutchinson on the same team, I would consider more of a deep sleeper, who's a really good player, but just may not be in a great situation. Cedric Tillman now is in a great, he's kind of high up on the radar, but I'm not as keen on his situation there. Running backs, I mean, I don't know if there's any deep sleepers at the position, guys that are in a good spots. Evan Hull is the guy right now, and everyone's going to be all over him because the long-term future of Jonathan Taylor's is in some question there. So Chase Brown seems to be rising up the ranks a little bit. Don't think I would consider him a deep sleeper as well. I want to say I'm probably overstating the case here. I'm going to see where he's going. Yeah, he's not going. I would say a guy that just kind of I've had an eye on that I've gotten really late in a dynasty league. I don't want to say some because it's not correct. But Chris Rodriguez in Washington is a player I've had an eye on. He fared really well in the preseason. I don't have high expectations for him, but if you're looking for sleepers, super late in drafts, those are the kind of guys. GT Sports, I have running back depth. Would you drop A.J. Dillon for Treylon Burks or Skyy Moore in an 8-man league? No. Well, maybe in an 8-man league. I know Dan Graziano from ESPN in his speculative piece this week. I love those speculative pieces. It just kind of gives you a little taste of what's going on around the league. He talks to people in all these locations before he says these things. He's not saying them, I don't think, to be provocative. I think he's saying them because he's hoping he's right, and it'll make him look smart when the season's over. But he feels like this is the year Dillon takes over as the primary back. Maybe not early in the season for Aaron Jones, but over the course of the season. I think, and this plays into one of my narratives that I've told myself over time. I think going back the last couple of years, I felt like, the desired outcome was A.J. Dillon becoming the primary back there at some point. It hasn't happened, right? For maybe different reasons. Last year, I felt like Aaron Rodgers' play was kind of a limiting factor for this offense overall and kept them from doing some of the things that Matt LaFleur wants to do. Mike LaFleur is his brother, who is the offensive coordinator. Matt LaFleur is the very successful Green Bay coach. So I do think, I've thought for a couple of years that the desired outcome was A.J. Dillon taking over, certainly down the stretch run of the seasons. Maybe that's a more realistic possibility as Aaron Jones gets older. But in an 8-man league, sure. I mean, I don't think I need any of those guys to be starters in an 8-man league. I don't know how deep your rosters are, but if they're really deep, I mean, it would be Treylon Burks would be my choice, but I know there are Skyy Moore peoples out there. I feel like in Kansas City, the wide receiver one any given week is going to shift. It's from play to play, it's going to shift. It's who's open, right? So if you're really confident Skyy Moore is going to be open a lot, I bet you Patrick Mahomes is going to hit him a lot. Treylon Burks seems like a big play threat, in a passing offense. It's not going to be one of the more robust in the league, but he's going to be one of the top options there. My two sleepers, Brian Larker, Tank Dell. Sean Tucker is one I should have thought of. I mean, it's hard to just come up with these things off. I didn't have my list prepared. I should always have my lists in front of me. Sean Tucker in Tampa Bay seems like, he's getting some work with the ones, or he has. I don't think it's been a consistent day-to-day thing, but certainly he's gotten some turns. And there's a Rachaad White. The opinions are widely polarizing on this guy. Good Lord, he should be in politics or something. People either love him or are totally unimpressed by him. And so that could go either way, and Sean Tucker is standing by. Sean Tucker is definitely a better back than his draft position, undrafted, would suggest. And it was due to health issues. Health issues are why he was not drafted, right? It wasn't until after the draft that right as the draft came, that people realized he was healthy, or healthy enough, or that the heart condition or whatever wasn't a huge concern. Dennis Mental. 16 team, half team PPR, 13th pick. How soon do you take 13th pick? In a 16 team, how soon do you take a quarterback? Probably, I'm assuming as a snake, I'd probably be seriously considering it in round 2. If I don't, and again, as you're at the tail end of round 1, I think that changes the dynamic. There are, obviously only 2 quarterbacks per team, and some guys are not going to feel very comfortable with their options at the tail end of that, and nor should they. So the quarterbacks may go at a little bit more of a premium, I would guess, in this Dennis. So I would my feeling would be I'm sitting there at 13. I see how it looks. If there's a super good skill player that I really feel strongly about, I'd probably grab him there and take my chances coming around. 13, 14, 15, 16. It's a good number of picks. I'd be giving it serious consideration in round 1 if there are quarterbacks coming off or I'm at a certain tier. Like I usually have some firewall players. Like when I see, let's say, Justin or Trevor Lawrence come off, that's usually an indication that I probably want to jump in pretty quick before, so I don't get shut out of a run that leaves me without ideal guys. But there's plenty of later ranked guys, lower ranked guys, I want to say. If you're just sitting there, I think that range of quarterbacks that I'm interested in goes far beyond, that top group, right? So, right after, let's say, the top 8 or so, I still like Tua, I still like Dak, I still like Deshaun Watson, okay, Kirk Cousins, perfectly serviceable, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith. So I think if I'm sitting there and it hits that firewall at 13, I'm going to look carefully at the skill players that are waiting for me at the other positions. If there's nobody I totally love, I would probably take a quarterback, but I'm thinking there will be someone there you could totally love if quarterbacks are going fast. So that'll dictate. Be fluid, be ready and open to the possibilities. That's what I said, have a plan, but be ready to deviate from it depending on what the draft asks you to do, right? So the draft may ask you to go quarterback right away, right? So be ready to do that. But also, just as I sit here thinking this, I'm thinking, man, I might get a great skill player. If people are going quarterback crazy or half the league is quarterback crazy, I'm still going to get a pretty good quarterback coming back around. So that'd probably be my leaning, but totally open to seeing what the room is doing. Tank wants to know, which running backs do I like for a late round flyer in a 12-team 1-point PPR? Kendre Miller or Rochon Johnson? Achane is already gone. Probably at the moment it's Rochon Johnson. Seems like he's likely to have a third down role as is. I like Kendre Miller. I don't like that he has struggled to be healthy. He's had his second injury, dealing with his second injury now in the course of camp. So have some concerns there. Also, it's a hamstring, so additional concern there. Jamal Williams obviously still there. I still like Miller, maybe in Dynasty more than I do in redraft at the moment. Rochon Johnson for me. Jim says in his league, QB TDs are worth 6 instead of 4. 25 TDs equals 50 more fantasy points. How much does that move quarterback up the ranks? Well, a couple of things. I mean, it probably is a little more meaningful 4-point, I tend to think these changes are relative, right? And I know bring up JJ Zachariason again. The difference between full point and half point PPR is very minimal at the top end of the ranks, right? So, the amount of change in finishes in half point to full point PPR is very minimal. I'm suspecting that's the same in the 6-point to 4-point TD touchdowns, except for guys who run in a lot, right? And I mean, that's where the big difference is. So I'm not shifting it a ton. I think it probably makes me a slightly less dial back on the more mobile quarterbacks, but I still love the more mobile quarterbacks, because they have 2 paths to touchdown success. So I think relatively speaking, it's the same for me, Jim. Guys who pass for more, maybe or high volume passing offenses. Maybe I'm a little more interested in the Kirk Cousinses. That sounds funny because it does sound funny. Of the world, because there's a super high volume passing and his touchdowns, so therefore most of them are passes. So, but I think that's the difference, right? It's a little bit of a hair splitter for me. St.Brown or Kupp is my last keeper. Already keeping Chase and Kelsey. Yeah, I'd go ahead and keep St.Brown at the moment. I mean, because I'm guessing, if this is a 1 year at a time thing, if it's, if you can keep them for multiple years, the Chase is an easy call. I'd probably consider Kelsey as well, because you spelled Kelsey differently and I didn't recognize his name at first. I saw Chase. St.Brown, so already keeping Chase and Kelsey. I'd probably keep St.Brown, just given the current circumstances and assuming I can keep them beyond this year. All right, Guillotine. Got the #1 pick. Not thrilled. I think the best player in your rankings should be the plan. Minimize risky picks. High ceiling, low floor reaches. Right, minimize risky picks. That is the right mindset. All you have to do is not lose, right, in a Guillotine. That's the goal, right? So I think the thing that I recognized or come to find, especially, you won't get shut out, but quarterbacks tend to go at a premium, so the high-end quarterbacks are going to go pretty quick because people feel really confident. A good quarterback can carry you through a number of weeks, right? So you see a lot of that, Dave. A lot of people going quarterback heavy, but I think your general approach is correct. Minimize risky picks, high ceiling, low floor, and reaches are totally the guys that you wanna like be cautious of. Deon Brown, deep sleeper. He's one of the guys mentioned in Dan Graziano's piece this week on ESPN. Thinks there's a bigger role coming for him. He did look good in the preseason, right? I thought it was great. So there were times, like, I'm still big on Terry McLaurin. Also, Terry McLaurin is injured with a toe. So I'm still drafting. I think Terry McLaurin's price is a little less cost prohibitive than Cooper Kupp's, even if he drops down to the second round, where I will still draft him. But I think Terry McLaurin's price is still pretty appealing to me. Let's check the high stakes price range on him and Brown versus Brown. And it brings up there's some circumstances, I mentioned earlier, that I've been talking to Parker Gabriel from the Denver Post. And man, just talk about somebody else who's had really glowing things to say about Courtland Sutton, who's going so much later still than Jerry Jeudy, who is out indefinitely at the moment with a hamstring. That is crazy. And man, if you missed the program and you have Sirius, go listen to the On Demand. I believe it was last Friday night. It was fascinating. The things he said. He's reshaped his body. He's never going to be the fastest guy, Courtland Sutton, but he knows that he's got a great opportunity with this X role that's been really successful in this Sean Payton, Joe Lombardi offense. And there's something to that. I mean, sometimes I just like drafting the cheaper piece because I like drafting the cheaper piece. Terry McLaurin currently going in round 5. I think the injury is baked into that cake. And there's a couple others that struck me. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens are moving slightly up my ranks for the reason that this offense looks really good. Looks like Kenny Pickett's ready to take a step forward. But yes, so Deon Brown I do think is a reasonable deep sleeper. He got some run last 2 years actually. So will the weekly rankings come out before this Thursday? Yes, they will. I will be finalizing them. Emil Kadlik does the first pass. I will finalize them and put in the notes and stuff. I do that late Wednesday night. And then they're out early Thursday morning. And by early Thursday morning, I mean like just around midnight or so. So 1 a.m., something usually about the latest. So yes, you'll have them Thursday morning when you get up. Mr. Scamper stashed Rodriguez a couple days ago. Miles Gaskin and Salvin Ahmed worth a gander for us sickos. Miles Gaskin, yes, on the Minnesota Vikings now. Be interesting to see what he does. The landscapers are every other week. We are in a non-yard guy week right now. What a win that is for all of us. Where would I put Van Jefferson for week 1 without Kupp? So I have not yet done my week 1 rankings. I think as the wide receiver 1, the de facto wide receiver 1, assuming there is no Cooper Kupp, and I think that's kind of what we're all assuming, just based on Sean McVay. And right, that might not be correct, right? He may not be as bad as we think, but I think, maybe we're being hopeful that Sean McVay is going to follow what he said, basically that, they don't want him to just be okay. They want him to be right. And that suggests that he will miss some time, right? Or at least miss a game, maybe 2 games. So that puts Van Jefferson, I'm not going to go overboard on this, right? Who are they playing? I'm not in matchup mode yet, so I have to actually look at the schedule here as I'm just getting started and getting into this. I'm still in draft mode, people. Playing the Seattle Seahawks. Over under the game is 46.5. Probably a lot of that's going. What do we got? Who's the favorite here? Seattle's 6-point favorites. Yeah, I'm not going to go overboard on this one. You probably fall. I'm assuming you didn't draft him to be one of your starters. Do I think this is a case where you want to take advantage of that week 1? It depends on who your other starters are. So I'm probably going to rank him, my initial thought is I'm ranking him outside my top 36 somewhere, probably, or in that 30 range. So I'd watch for that and kind of go by that. But it's going to depend, Paul, what other players you draft, whether you really want to take that chance without Kupp. I mean, it's not like he has a huge body of work to fall back on or a huge body of work with Matthew Stafford. He just hasn't done a lot of work with Matthew Stafford. He was kind of coming back last year as Stafford was leaving. So I don't want to overstate my case here on Van Jefferson. And honestly, I haven't done my rankings yet, so I probably want to reserve judgment without getting too specific. But I do think, I hope you have 3 better receivers to start. Keith Miller, 10-team, playing 2 quarterbacks every week. We have every week have pick 6, assuming the top 5 quarterbacks go. Should I go quarterback or top position player, standard scoring, non-PPR? I'm guessing that is. 10-team gives you a little more leeway. Everyone can have 3 quarterbacks they feel okay about to start the season. But you do want to start 2. I'm looking carefully at what's happening the first 5 picks. And so assuming the first 5 do go off, it might look like a race. It's less of a race in my experience than 10 teams, but I would play it by ear. If 5 go off, I'm probably taking the 6, right? Because I don't want to get shut out of the high end. And then I play it by ear in round 2 and beyond. So there you have that. I think I've extinguished all the questions. So I'll just there's some more questions. I'll just kind of reiterate, though, some of the thoughts on the draft here before we get out of here for anyone who came in late. A different league than before, 12 teams, says Mike Arts. PPR drafting 3rd, thinking 0 running back, assuming Chase and JJ go with Tyrek Hill. Would you be comfortable going with Khalil Herbert, Javonte Williams, that tier running back? I would be. I would not want Javonte Williams to be my running back 1, though. Khalil Herbert's another guy who's rising up the ranks a little bit. I had a really good reporter tell me that he thought early last month, that it looked like Deon Foreman would clearly be the lead. That information does not correspond to what we've heard ever since and what we saw on the field, where Khalil Herbert is getting all the work with the first team offense, right? And I think that's something we tend to watch for a little bit, is how those things, the utilization is going in these preseason, who's on the field with the starters. You could say the same about Dameon Pierce. I want to say, what was he on the field? I think he got every down with the starters this year. So that's pretty positive for Dameon Pierce, who should be, who's becoming increasing interest to me. So Khalil Herbert, yes. Javonte Williams, I'm fine with getting him. I just want to have, a solid starter or 2 ahead of him before I invest, or at least some solid guys after that I think will give me some weekly volume. Again, if you're just tuning in, I ran through some draft strategies to get the thing started, and just to highlight them, you can go back and listen to the beginning, but be prepared, understand, do some mock drafts with your settings and your roster requirements and all those things. So do that. Try to remain emotionless. Don't draft last year's best team, but still draft some of last year's best players. It's a balance, people. Regression, keep it in mind. Don't draft magical seasons. Have a plan. Be ready to adapt and adjust as you need. And whether you're going like 0 RB, hero RB, whatever the approach is, heavy, wide receiver heavy, bully tight end, whatever, be ready to deviate. And remember, there are different ways you can get to the end game, that maybe aren't necessarily what you had in mind. It wasn't your, totally expected outcome, but you can still get to where you want to go. The most important rule, though, for me is don't be a prisoner of ADP. I know everyone in this chat knows better than that and is not doing that. So I have a few more questions here. A lot of mixed feelings on Rachaad White. What's your feelings? It looks like a clear path to volume for me. And I think at the current price for him, let's find out what the latest is so I don't steer you wrong. Rachaad White is going as the 22nd running back off the board. He's going in round 6 with that same range of players. I think it's a really good range. And probably I'll leave off Breece Hall, who kind of starts this round 5 running backs. But Dameon Pierce, Alexander Madison, I'm using high stakes ADP, the latest. Alexander Madison, 17. Kenneth Walker at 18. James Cook at 19. He's a rising player. J.K. Dobbins at 20. Miles Sanders, I have concerns about the offensive line there, but not the volume. Rachaad White at 22. Javonte Williams coming off next at 23. That seems a little aggressive to me for a player that might get off to a slow start. Alvin Kamara, little aggressive to me, but round 7 for a player who you know is going to miss 3 games. Cam Akers is next. James Conner, one of my favorite of this whole bunch, who lousy team, but a robust role, not a lot to cut into his workload. Jonathan Taylor right now going at 27. David Montgomery at 28. DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco, Khalil Herbert, Dalvin Cook. I think that's a little late for Cook. I'd look to reap that value. Brian Robinson, Antonio Gates, Samaje Perine, Raheem Mostert, A.J. Dillon. That's a pretty good range of talent there, right? It's a broad swath, and I like that group. Is Quentin Johnston worthy of a drop as a late pick? Seems like Josh Palmer is still very much a thing. Mr. Scampers asked this, and I think that is fair. Look, I started hearing this in, I want to say, early August. Joe Reedy from the Associated Press told me, but Daniel Popper from The Athletic is still reporting just this week that Josh Palmer looks locked in as a 3. Joe Reedy told me, I want to say it was the first or second week of August, that Johnston is the number 4, that Palmer had already locked it up. So this is not a new development. This is just confirmation of an ongoing thing. So I don't know if I want to drop Johnston if there were injury or something. He seems like he could move up the ranks noticeably. But if you need a roster spot and you have a more serious need at another position, or someone that you feel like you need somebody who can help you right away, I don't think Quentin Johnston is that guy to start the season, for sure. We all know Mike Williams and Keenan Allen had trouble staying on the field last year. I mean, I think if either of those guys go down, you're gonna have a great run. But yeah, rookies are not for week 1, especially. Well, so like Jordan Addison might be okay for week 1 if you had to, right? Zay Flowers maybe if you had to. I mean, I like to wait and see. I'm with you, Dame. I mean, and I know there are people out there that are just like all in on the rookies, and not without good reason, but in the right place, right? And I guess that would be the last thing, I would leave you with in terms of draft strategy. Every player at the right price. I'm not shutting anyone out of possibly being drafted for me. So, but it's the price is what matters. So when you talk about Rachaad White, I think the price is right. I don't think, you look at the volume last year, though, when there was no Leonard Fournette. I think he had like a 20, above north of 20%. I want to say 21 without double checking. Someone can fact check me if they'd like. But got a great target share. I know it's not Tom Brady playing quarterback, but maybe Baker Mayfield's going to be dumping off a little bit more, release some. So I think White's a reasonable play, and I think he's reasonably priced right now. What tight ends towards the end of the draft do I recommend? Quentin Johnston or Romeo Doubs. If that's a sit-start question, it's Romeo Doubs. If it's a season-long question, it's Romeo Doubs. If it's a draft question right now, it's Romeo Doubs. Right now. The tight ends, there's a pretty good group of guys. We were talking about this last night on the radio that I'd be okay playing if I had to. Like outside the top 12, I want to just run down here, like Chig Okonkwo, Juwan Johnson, Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, Greg Dulcich. Again, Parker Gabriel. Could not say enough about Greg Dulcich. And I'll remind you that Peter Schrager took like 5 minutes of Good Morning Football to talk about Greg Dulcich as a sleeper player. I'm thinking a guy who's good friends with Sean Payton is not going to put 5 minutes of national television time towards a player unless Sean Payton said, hey, this guy. Right? So I think, so I think there are a lot of late round tight ends that I could value. And if you're in desperation mode even, I would take that all the way down to the Tyler Conklins of the world. All right, everybody, I'm going to call it a day. It's been great. Hope your drafts go well. It's been a great offseason and preseason. We're ready to switch into regular season mode. I will be here Wednesday night this week, 7 p.m. We'll round up a guest, or I may go without a guest this week since there's going to be a lot of lineup questions for week 1, a lot of injury discussions and things to work through. So I'll figure that out here and I'll let you know via my Twitter account. That's at FootballDieHard. And you'll get your emails from the website if you're a subscriber. Also, if you're not a subscriber, go subscribe. Use the promo code DieHards to get 15% off. That's still viable. We'll be moving into Flash Update, our regular season premium content. The August update information all still available. Rankings all still available. Rankings all being updated. So you'll have tons of information available to you right up through your draft. We'll run that even beyond Thursday's game because some of the high-stakes leagues continue drafting because of their quirky nature of that first week. So we'll have you all dialed in. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Scampers, Andrea, E. Perkin, GT Sports, Dame, Andrea, Jim, Brian Larkin, everybody. I'm leaving people out. I've really appreciated having you. Looking forward to getting into a season full of good times, man. I love football, love fantasy football. Love that you all come here and be part of this community. Look forward to seeing you next time. Listen into the radio tonight, 5 to 7 p.m., where times are shifting. Also, Tuesday night, I'll be covering the Alice in Chains draft, hosting that on SiriusXM. So look for that. You're listening